June 13th, 1944, London, England. 4:18 a.m. A strange sound echoed across the early morning darkness, a mechanical buzzing, loud, rhythmic, unnatural. Then suddenly, silence. 10 seconds later, an explosion ripped through Grove Road in Bethnal Green. The blast killed 6 people, injured 9 others, destroyed several houses. Nobody knew what had happened. No aircraft had been overhead. No bombs fell from the sky. But something had struck London. Something new. Something terrifying. Something Hitler called his vengeance weapon. The V-1 flying bomb had arrived, and Britain's secret war to stop it had already been raging for over a year. This is the story of Operation Crossbow, the desperate intelligence campaign to find and destroy Hitler's secret weapons before they could change the course of World War II. A story of aerial photography analysed by thousands, of brave pilots flying unarmed reconnaissance missions, of bombers sacrificing themselves to destroy launch sites, of scientists racing to understand weapons unlike anything the world had seen, a secret war fought with cameras, not guns, with analysis, not assaults, with intelligence, not infantry. The threat nobody believed, the warnings began in 1939. A mysterious document arrived in the British Embassy in Oslo, Norway. Anonymous, detailed, specific. It described German secret weapons research, rockets, radio-controlled glider bombs, remote-controlled aircraft, new radar systems. The Oslo report contained information so accurate, so technical, that many British intelligence officers dismissed it as disinformation, too good to be true. Obviously a German deception, but one man took it seriously. Dr. R.V. Jones, the Assistant Director of Intelligence in the Air Ministry's Scientific Intelligence Branch. He was 28 years old. Jones carefully filed the Oslo report. He waited. He watched. He gathered evidence. By 1943, multiple intelligence sources were reporting German rocket development. Prisoner of war interrogations mentioned secret weapons. French resistance networks reported unusual construction in northern France. Polish intelligence provided crucial details. The pieces were assembling. In April 1943, Duncan Sandys, Churchill's son-in-law and a Member of Parliament, was appointed to investigate. The code name for the investigation, Bodyline. The Central Interpretation Unit at RAF Medmenham, 60 miles west of London, became the nerve centre. This was no ordinary military facility. It was a country house, Danesfield House in Buckinghamshire. Inside, nearly 2,000 men and women worked in complete secrecy. They were photographic interpreters. Their job, analyse millions of aerial photographs, find the secrets Germany was trying to hide. The discovery nobody expected, May 1943, a routine reconnaissance flight over northern Germany. The pilot photographed the Baltic coast near a place called Peenemünde, an obscure location, previously unknown to British intelligence. When the photographs were developed and examined, something caught the interpreter's attention. New buildings, unusual circular shapes on the ground, 3 large circular areas that made no sense. More flights were ordered, more photographs taken, more analysis conducted. By June, the photographic interpreters had identified something extraordinary, a massive research and development facility. TEST stands for rockets, assembly buildings, housing for thousands of workers. On June 29, 1943, a pivotal meeting occurred in Churchill's Cabinet War Room. Duncan Sandys presented the photographic evidence. The images showed rockets, actual rockets visible in the photographs, 46 feet long, clearly designed for long-range bombardment. Churchill's scientific advisor, Professor Frederick Lindemann, argued it was a hoax, elaborate German deception, designed to waste Allied bombing resources. R.V. Jones disagreed. The evidence was too consistent, the construction too extensive, the investment too large for a mere deception. Churchill made the decision. Despite the distance, 600 miles from the nearest British airbase, despite the challenges, heavily defended, protected by smoke screens, despite the risks, flying in moonlight at low altitude, Peenemünde must be destroyed. We must attack it on the heaviest possible scale. The raid nobody survived. August 17, 1943. Evening briefing rooms across eastern England. Bomber command airfields. 596 heavy bombers prepared for a special mission. 324 Avro Lancasters. 218 Handley Page Halifaxes. 54 short Stirlings. The crews assembled for briefing. When the target was revealed, a tiny island on the Baltic coast, a murmur of astonishment rippled through the rooms. "What are we doing having a maximum effort on a little tiny place like that?" the briefing officers explained. Sort of. Security prevented full disclosure. The crews were told Peenemünde was developing advanced radar that would greatly improve German night fighter defences, a direct threat to every bomber crew. The real target? Rocket scientists. The primary objective? Kill as many personnel as possible. Secondary objectives? Destroy the facility and documentation. 3 specific aiming points: scientists' living quarters, the rocket factory, the experimental station. The briefing order emphasized the mission's importance. If the attack fails, it will be repeated the next night and on ensuing nights regardless, within practical limits, of casualties. This wasn't a normal raid. This was essential. The bombers took off that evening. The flight was long, 600 miles each way. They flew low, 8,000 feet instead of the usual 19,000. They flew in moonlight, necessary for accuracy, but terrifying for visibility. A deception operation, codenamed Whitebait, sent 8 mosquitoes to Berlin. They dropped marker flares, simulating the start of a major raid. German night fighters scrambled toward Berlin. The deception worked, initially. Over Peenemünde, Group Captain John Searby circled as Master Bomber. This was the first time Bomber Command used a master bomber to coordinate an attack in real time. Searby directed the waves, called in new markers, adjusted aim points, kept the bombers focused. The first wave struck at 0010. Red target indicators lit up the night. Then the bombs fell. 1 through 1938 tons of high explosive and incendiary bombs. But there was a problem. Clouds interfered with visibility. H2S radar didn't work as expected. The markers were placed incorrectly, 2 miles off target. Instead of hitting the scientists' housing at Karlshagen, the first wave struck the Trassenheide forced labour camp. 555 prisoners were killed, mostly Polish political prisoners and Soviet POWs, slaves working on the very rockets Britain was trying to destroy. The second wave adjusted, found better markers, hit production facilities. The third wave arrived just as German night fighters realized Berlin was a decoy. About 30 Focke-Wulf FW-190s raced to the Baltic coast. They tore into the bomber stream. This was also the first operational use of Schräge Musik, jazz music. Twin upward-firing cannons installed in Messerschmitt, Bf-110s. The night fighters positioned themselves below bombers, fired upward into fuel tanks and bomb bays. Devastating. 29 of the 40 bombers lost that night fell to the third wave: 23 Lancasters, 15 Halifaxes, 2 Stirlings, 243 RAF aircrew died. Many more became prisoners of war. On the ground, the raid killed approximately 730 people, 545 forced labourers at Trassenheide, about 170 German civilians, 2 V-2 rocket scientists, including engine designer Walter Thiel. Was it successful? Initial British assessment delayed the V2 program by 4 to 6 months. Post-war German accounts delayed it by 2 months. The truth was somewhere in between. More importantly, the raid forced the Germans to disperse. Production moved underground to the Mittelwerk complex near Nordhausen. Testing relocated to Blizna in occupied Poland. The centralized development at Peenemünde ended. This made tracking the program harder. But it also made the program less efficient. The Luftwaffe Chief of Staff, General Hans Jeschonek, was so shaken by the successful deception that he shot himself on August 19th, 2 days after the raid. The sights nobody could see. November 1943. Photographic interpreters at Medmenham noticed something new. Construction sites in northern France. Unusual buildings. Distinctive shapes. They were called ski sites because their layout resembled a ski with a curved ramp, 96 of them, all aligned toward London. These were V1 launch sites. Additionally, 11 large construction projects were identified. Massive concrete bunkers, far larger than necessary for V1s. These were for the V2. On November 15, 1943, the code name changed from Bodyline to Crossbow. The operation expanded massively. Fighter pilots who flew reconnaissance missions over occupied France described what they saw: modified Spitfires and Mosquitoes, unarmed, flying at extreme altitudes or very low levels, taking millions of photographs. The procedure was remarkable. An aircraft could land, photographs could be developed, initial interpretation could be completed, all within 2 hours. Speed was essential. German construction crews worked fast. A site photographed on Monday might be operational by Friday. The photographic interpreters worked with stereoscopic viewers. 2 overlapping photographs viewed simultaneously created a 3D image. This revealed details impossible to see in single photographs: height of structures, depth of excavations, camouflage techniques. They were looking for specific signatures. For V1 sites, a long launching ramp, a ski building for storage, a curved supply building. For V2 sites, massive concrete structures, often with blast walls. Constance Babington Smith was one of the most skilled interpreters. She specialized in aircraft recognition, but in 1943 she was assigned to find something new: the V1. In photographs of Peenemünde, she spotted a tiny cross-shaped object on a launch ramp, wingspan, about 20 feet based on scale calculations, fuselage, stubby, unusual, a pulse jet engine on top. This was the first photographic identification of the V1, the bombs nobody could avoid. The V1 was terrifying, not because it was accurate, it wasn't, not because it was devastating, though it could be, because it was mechanical, emotionless, relentless. The V1 was essentially a flying bomb. A pulse jet engine provided thrust. A simple gyroscopic autopilot kept it stable. A mechanical counter measured distance based on propeller rotations. When the counter reached 0, the engine cut off. The V1 dived toward the ground, detonated. The 170-pound warhead created enormous explosions. Speed, 400 mph. Range, 150 miles. Cost to produce, far less than a conventional bomber. No pilot required. No losses if shot down. Between June 1944 and March 1945, Germany launched over 9,500 V1s at England. About 2,400 reached London. Over 6,000 people killed. More than 17,000 injured. But the V1 had weaknesses. It was slow enough to be intercepted. Fighter aircraft could shoot them down. Anti-aircraft guns could hit them. Barrage balloons could snag them. Britain developed a comprehensive defence system. Fighter aircraft patrolled in zones. The fastest fighters, Hawker Tempests, modified Spitfires, Gloucester Meteors, Britain's first jet fighters. They pursued the V1s. shot them down over the Channel or unpopulated areas. Anti-aircraft gun belts were positioned in layers. 332 guns dedicated to V1 defence around London alone. The guns used proximity fuses, revolutionary technology, shells that exploded automatically when near a target, barrage balloons, approximately 1,750 around London, steel cables suspended from balloons. V1s flying into the cables would crash. The defences improved dramatically. Early in the campaign, only about 40% of V1s were destroyed. By March 1945, over 80% were being intercepted. The rocket Nobody Could Stop, September 8, 1944. 6:43 p.m, Chiswick, West London, no warning, no sound. Just a massive explosion, a crater 30 feet deep, buildings destroyed for hundreds of yards, 3 people killed. Seconds later, a sonic boom echoed across London, the sound of the rocket that had already struck. The V2 had arrived. Unlike the V1, there was no defence against the V2. It flew too high, moved too fast, arrived without warning. The V2 was the world's first ballistic missile, 46 feet tall, 13 tons at launch, fueled by liquid oxygen and ethanol. It launched vertically, accelerated to 3,500 mph, faster than sound, reached an altitude of 60 miles, then fell back to Earth. Impact velocity, 2,000 newton. The 2,200-pound warhead created a crater and devastation. No one on the ground heard it coming. The sonic boom arrived after impact. Between September 1944 and March 1945, Germany launched about 3,000 V2s. Approximately 1,400 hit England, about 2,700 people killed in London, thousands more injured, but V2s also struck Antwerp, a crucial Allied supply port. More V2s hit Antwerp than London. There was no defence. The only solution? Find and destroy the launch sites. But V2 launches required no fixed installation, mobile launchers, fired from wooded areas, moved constantly. Allied intelligence struggled. Photographic reconnaissance could rarely catch launchers. They arrived, fired, departed within hours. The solution was to bomb storage depots, liquid oxygen plants, transportation routes, anything that supported the V2 supply chain. On August 25, 1944, the US 8th Air Force bombed 5 liquid oxygen plants in Belgium. These plants provided the oxidizer necessary for V2 launches. Destroying them temporarily reduced launch rates. But the Germans adapted, moved production, dispersed storage, continued launching. The cost nobody calculated. Operation Crossbow consumed enormous resources. Over 36,000 tons of bombs dropped by RAF Bomber Command alone. Thousands of bombing sorties. Hundreds of aircraft lost, thousands of aircrew killed. At one point, the British government, in near panic, demanded 40% of all bomber sorties target V weapon sites. This diversion was significant. Every raid on a V1 launch site was one fewer raid on German industry, oil refineries, or cities. The strategic bombing campaign was disrupted. General Karl Spaatz, commander of US Strategic Air Forces, protested. He argued attacks should focus on German electrical grids, gyroscope factories, and fuel production. These would cripple the V-weapon program indirectly, but political pressure was intense. V1s were hitting London daily. British morale was threatened. The government needed visible action. Eisenhower, as Supreme Commander, gave crossbow attacks absolute priority in April 1944. This was weeks before D-Day. The V-weapons could potentially disrupt the invasion. If V1s could hit ships in the English Channel, if V2s could strike embarkation ports, the entire invasion might be jeopardized. So crossbow became the top priority, above everything else. Was it worth it? The bombs certainly damaged V-weapon production. Germany planned to produce 6,000 V1s per month. They never came close. Total production, about 30,000 V1s. Launched, about 16,500. The remainder destroyed in factories and storage. For V2s, 6,000 produced, about 3,000 launched. Operation Crossbow delayed the V weapons' operational debut. V1 launches delayed by approximately 3 months. V2 launches delayed by approximately 6 months. These delays were crucial. If V1s had begun in March 1944 instead of June, if V2s had begun in March 1944 instead of September, the weapons would have struck during D-Day preparations. The disruption could have been catastrophic. So Crossbow succeeded, not in completely stopping the V weapons, but in delaying them until Allied victory was inevitable. The horror nobody acknowledged. The V2 production required a dark secret, slave labor. After the Peenemünde raid dispersed production, the Germans built the Mittelwerk facility, an underground factory complex in the Harz Mountains near Nordhausen, tunnels carved into the mountains, safe from bombing. The labor force, prisoners from the Dora concentration camp, 15,000 to 25,000 forced laborers, mostly political prisoners, Soviet POWs, concentration camp inmates. The conditions were hell. Workers lived underground, no sunlight, minimal food, brutal treatment. They worked 12-hour shifts, assembling rockets, installing guidance systems, mixing fuel. Thousands died from exhaustion, from malnutrition, from beatings, from executions. The exact death toll at Dora is uncertain. Estimates range from 12,000 to 20,000. More people died building the V2 than died from V2 attacks. This grim calculus haunted the program. The wonder weapon was built on slavery and death. When American forces overran Nordhausen in April 1945, they found the horror: emaciated survivors, corpses stacked like cordwood. The underground factory preserved as evidence. The V2 wasn't just a weapon, it was a crime. The pilots nobody thanked. The reconnaissance pilots who made Crossbow possible flew extraordinarily dangerous missions. Unarmed aircraft, flying over heavily defended territory, alone, no fighter escort, no defensive armament. Their only protection, speed and altitude. Modified Spitfires, stripped of weapons, fitted with cameras, painted light blue. They flew at 40,000 feet, above the effective ceiling of most German fighters, but also in dangerously thin air. Pilots wore pressure suits. Oxygen failures could kill within minutes. Low-level reconnaissance was even more dangerous. Modified mosquitoes flying at treetop level, 500 mmHg, filming targets with oblique cameras. German anti-aircraft fire was intense. One mistake, one moment of inattention meant death. Many reconnaissance pilots died, shot down by fighters, hit by flak, lost to mechanical failures at extreme altitude. Their photographs were essential. Without them, Crossbow would have been impossible. The V weapon sites would never have been found. The programs would never have been disrupted. Yet these pilots rarely received recognition. Their missions were classified. Their photographs were analyzed by others. They flew, photographed, returned. Repeat. Day after day. Mission after mission. The intelligence. Nobody could ignore beyond aerial photography. Human intelligence was crucial. The French resistance reported extensively on V-weapon sites. Réseau AGIR network provided details on construction in Nord-Pas-de-Calais. Agents measured dimensions, counted workers, sketched layouts. Reports described enormous trenches at the Watton bunker complex, confirmed locations aligned toward London, provided early warning of site readiness. Polish intelligence performed remarkable work. In 1944, Polish Home Army members recovered components from a crashed V2 at Blizna. They smuggled the parts to Britain: a damaged guidance system, engine components, fuel tank fragments. R.V. Jones examined the components. He refined estimates of the warhead, originally feared to be 10 tons, actually about 1 ton. This was crucial intelligence. The threat was still serious, but not catastrophic. Danish resistance also contributed. In August 1942, before Peenemünde was even identified, a Danish naval officer discovered a crashed early V-1 prototype. He reported it. The information was filed away. Later, it helped confirm V-1 development. Code breakers at Bletchley Park provided essential intelligence, ultra-decrypts of German Enigma communications, signals from the Luftwaffe's Signals Experiment Regiment, details about radar and navigation systems for V-weapons. By December 1943, Ultra confirmed the A4, V2's designation, was a high-altitude ballistic rocket. Decrypts revealed V1 specifications: height, speed, range. All these intelligence streams flowed to Medmenham. Photographic interpreters correlated human intelligence with aerial photographs. Codebreaker information with resistance reports, POW interrogations with technical analysis. The complete picture emerged slowly, piece by piece, photograph by photograph, report by report. The end nobody celebrated March 27, 1945. The last V2 was launched. It struck London, the final victim of Hitler's vengeance weapons. 2 weeks later, on April 13th, Britain discontinued radar tracking of potential V2 launches. The threat had ended. May 2, 1945, the last V1 launch. Operation Crossbow officially ended. The V-weapons campaign was over. Germany surrendered days later. The final statistics: V1, over 9,500 launched at England. About 2,400 reached targets, 6,184 killed, 17,981 injured. V2, about 3,000 launched, approximately 1,400 hit England, 2,754 killed in London, thousands more injured. Many V2s also struck Antwerp and other continental targets. Combined, nearly 9,000 British civilians killed, over 20,000 injured, entire neighbourhoods destroyed, psychological trauma widespread. But the V-weapons came too late. By June 1944, Allied victory was inevitable. The Normandy invasion succeeded. Germany was being pushed back on all fronts. The V-weapons inflicted suffering, but they couldn't change the war's outcome. The legacy nobody imagined. The V2's real legacy wasn't military, it was technological. After Germany's surrender, Allied forces raced to capture V2 technology. American Operation Paperclip brought German rocket scientists to the United States, Werner von Braun and his team. Over 100 German engineers and scientists. They would develop America's space program. The Saturn V rocket that reached the moon, designed by former V2 engineers. The Soviet Union captured the Mittelwerk factory, shipped entire production lines to Russia, forced German engineers to recreate the V2. The Cold War space race began with V2 technology. Every ballistic missile descended from the V2. Every space rocket traced lineage to Peenemünde. The technology that terrorized London became the foundation for human spaceflight. The heroes nobody remembers. Operation Crossbow succeeded because of thousands of unsung heroes. The photographic interpreters at Medmenham, mostly women, mostly civilians, working in complete secrecy, analyzing millions of photographs, finding the needles in haystacks, the reconnaissance pilots, flying unarmed into danger, day after day. Many never returned. The bomber crews who struck V-weapon sites, facing intense flak, sacrificing themselves to destroy launch ramps. The French, Polish and Danish resistance members, risking execution, gathering intelligence, sending reports. The scientists like R.V. Jones, analyzing fragments, calculating capabilities, advising policymakers, the code breakers at Bletchley Park, decrypting messages, revealing German plans, all worked in secrecy. Most received no public recognition. Their contributions were classified for decades, but they saved countless lives. Their intelligence, their analysis, their courage delayed the V weapons long enough, protected the D-Day invasion, ensured Allied victory. The technical marvel nobody wanted the V2 was genuinely revolutionary. Understanding its specifications reveals why it was so terrifying. Height, 46 feet, 14 meters. Diameter, 5.5 feet at the widest point. Launch weight, 27,600 pounds, 12.5 tons. Empty weight, 8,800 pounds, 4 tons. Warhead, 2,200 pounds, 1 ton of amatol explosive. Fuel, 8,300 pounds of ethanol, 75% solution. Oxidizer, 10,900 pounds of liquid oxygen. Propellant consumption, 275 pounds per second. Burn time, 65 seconds. Maximum velocity, 3,580 meters, Mach 4.7. Maximum altitude, 55 miles, 88 kilometers. Range, 200 miles, 320 kilometers. The guidance system was crude by modern standards, but revolutionary for 1944. Gyroscopes maintained orientation. An accelerometer shut off the engine when the desired velocity was reached. Graphite vanes in the rocket exhaust controlled the trajectory. Accuracy was poor. The V2 could hit within about 5 miles of the target. For striking a city like London, this was sufficient. For hitting specific military targets, it was useless. But the principle was proven. A ballistic missile could strike without warning. No defense existed. The implications terrified military planners. The V1 was cruder, but in some ways more practical. Length, 25.3 feet, 7.7 meters. Wingspan, 17.3 feet, 5.3 meters. Launch weight, 4,750 pounds, 2,150 kilos. Warhead, 1,870 pounds, 850 kilos of amatol. The pulse jet engine was simple. Air entered the front, fuel injected, ignited. Explosion forced air out the back. This created a vacuum. More air rushed in. The cycle repeated 50 times per second. This created the distinctive buzzing sound. Buzz bomb. Doodle bug. Maximum speed, 400 mm. Cruising altitude, 2,000 to 3,000 feet. Range, 150 miles. Cost to produce, 5,000 Reichsmarks, about $2,000 in 1944. Compared to a bomber, over 200,000 Reichsmarks. Germany could produce V1s cheaply, launch them without risking pilots, terrorize cities economically. The race nobody acknowledged. As Germany collapsed in April-May 1945, a race began. American, British and Soviet forces all wanted the same prize. German rocket scientists, V2 technology, production equipment. The Americans moved first. Operation Paperclip, a secret program to recruit German scientists. Werner von Braun, technical director at Peenemünde, surrendered to American forces on May 2, 1945. He brought over 100 engineers with him. They had hidden documents in a mine, blueprints, test data, production specifications. Von Braun made a calculated decision: surrender to the Americans, not the Soviets. The Americans would offer better conditions, better opportunities. Eventually, space exploration. The Americans shipped von Braun's team to the United States. Fort Bliss, Texas. White Sands, Proving Ground, New Mexico. They worked on rocket development for the U.S. Army. Moral questions were ignored. Von Braun had been a member of the Nazi Party, an SS officer. He'd overseen slave labor at Mittelwerk. He knew about the deaths, but America wanted his knowledge. The emerging Cold War made German scientists valuable. Defeating the Soviets mattered more than punishing Nazis. The Soviets weren't far behind. They captured Mittelwerk, dismantled the production lines, shipped everything to Russia. Helmut Grettrup and other German engineers were forced to work for the Soviets. They rebuilt the V2 production capability. The Soviet R-1 rocket, essentially a copy of the V-2. By the 1950s, both superpowers had ballistic missiles, based on V-2 technology, developed by German engineers. The space race began with V-2 derivatives. America's first satellite, Explorer 1 in 1958, launched on a rocket designed by von Braun's team. The Soviet Union's first satellite, Sputnik in 1957, launched on a rocket descended from captured V-2 technology. Every Cold War ICBM traced lineage to Peenemünde, Minuteman, Titan, Atlas, R-7, R-16, all children of the V-2. The bomber crews. Nobody counted the men who flew the Crossbow missions deserve their own recognition. Thousands of bomber sorties targeted V-weapon sites. Many crews died. Consider the ski sites. 96 V-1 launch ramps built in northern France. Each required precision bombing to destroy, heavily defended by anti-aircraft guns. German fighters patrolled constantly. Allied bombers attacked repeatedly. Some sites were hit 5, 10, 15 times. The Germans rebuilt rapidly. New construction crews, fresh materials, different locations. It became a war of attrition. Destroy the sites faster than Germany could rebuild them. Bomber Command and the US 8th Air Force devoted enormous effort. At the peak, 40% of all bombing sorties targeted crossbow objectives. 40%. That meant fewer raids on oil refineries, fewer attacks on aircraft factories, fewer strikes on transportation networks. Strategically, this was costly. German war production was less disrupted. Oil shortages came later. Aircraft production continued longer, but the political pressure was irresistible. V-1s were hitting London daily. British civilians were dying. The government had to respond. The crews understood. They were protecting London, saving civilians, preventing terror attacks. But the missions were still deadly. Flak over the Pas-de-Calais was intense. German 88 Millipors anti-aircraft guns, radar-directed, accurate. Fighters from German bases in Belgium and northern France. Focke-Wulf FW-190s, Messerschmitt BF-109s. Fast, deadly, determined. Many bombers didn't return. Shot down by flak. Destroyed by fighters. Lost to mechanical failures. The crews who died attacking ski sites rarely get mentioned in histories of the strategic bombing campaign. They're footnotes, statistics. Losses attributed to other operations, but they were fighting the secret war, the intelligence war, the war against weapons that could have changed history. The deception. Nobody expected the Germans weren't passive victims. They fought back, with deception. Dummy launch sites were constructed, fake ski sites, built to look like real V-1 ramps from the air, but non-functional. Allied photographic interpreters had to distinguish real from fake. This required expertise, experience, careful analysis. The Germans learned Allied reconnaissance patterns. When British Spitfires flew over, construction stopped. Workers hid. Equipment was camouflaged. Reconnaissance photographs showed peaceful countryside. Hours later, construction resumed. Night work became common. Build under cover of darkness. Camouflage during the day. The Germans also moved production constantly. V-1 assembly didn't require large factories. Small workshops could produce components. Final assembly could happen near launch sites. This made targeting difficult. Bomb a factory in February. By March, production had moved elsewhere. For V-2s, mobility was even greater. The Milowagen transport vehicle could carry a V-2, drive it to a forest, erect it vertically, fuel it, launch it, drive away, all within hours. Allied intelligence struggled to track mobile launchers. Reconnaissance flights rarely caught launchers in position. By the time photographs were analysed, the launcher had moved. The only solution was to attack the supply chain, fuel depots, liquid oxygen plants, transportation routes, storage facilities. This strategy worked, partially. V2 launch rates were lower than Germany intended, but they couldn't be stopped completely. The V2s kept coming, until Allied armies overran the launch areas. The civilians, nobody protected for Londoners. The V-weapons were psychological torture. Conventional bombing raids had warning, air raid sirens, time to reach shelters, a sense of control. V1s gave some warning, the distinctive buzzing sound, then silence as the engine cut off, then explosion. You could hear them coming, track their progress. When the engine stopped, you knew it was falling. You had seconds to take cover. This created awful dilemmas. Stay in the shelter listening to V1s pass overhead, or risk going outside when none are heard? The psychological strain was immense. V2s were worse. No warning at all. The supersonic rocket arrived before its sound. Explosion, then sonic boom. You couldn't prepare, couldn't take cover. One moment, normal life. Next moment, death. The randomness was terrifying. V1s and V2s were inaccurate. They hit wherever they hit. Residential neighbourhoods, markets, churches, schools. One V2 struck a Woolworths store in Deptford on November 25, 1944. Saturday afternoon shopping. The store was crowded, 168 people killed, over 100 injured. Deadliest single V-weapon attack of the war. Another V2 hit Hughes Mansions in Stepney on March 27, 1945, the last V2 to strike London. 134 people killed. These weren't military targets. They were ordinary people, living their lives, trying to survive the war. The V-weapons didn't discriminate. No military value in killing civilians, but Hitler wanted vengeance. Vergeltungswaffe, vengeance weapon. Revenge for Allied bombing of German cities. Hamburg, Dresden, Berlin. An eye for an eye, civilian for civilian. This was terrorism, not warfare. The defence nobody could perfect Britain through everything at V1 defence. The results were impressive, improving throughout the campaign. Initially, only about 40% of V1s were intercepted. By the end, over 80%. The defence system had 3 layers. First, fighters over the English Channel. Hawker Tempest, the fastest British fighter, could catch V1s in level flight, shoot them down over water. Modified Spitfire Cartons, Rolls-Royce Griffon engines, powerful enough to catch V1s. Even early jet fighters were used. Gloucester Meteor F1, Britain's first operational jet fighter, top speed, 410 km, fast enough to intercept V1s. Second layer, anti-aircraft guns on the coast, positioned in belts, equipped with proximity fuses. The proximity fuse was a war-winning technology, a miniature radar in the shell. When it detected a target nearby, it exploded. No need for a direct hit. This dramatically improved success rates. Conventional fuses required direct hits or precise timing. Proximity fuses just needed to get close. Third layer, barrage balloons. 1,750 balloons around London. Steel cables suspended. V1s flying into cables crashed. Simple, effective, no ammunition required. The system worked, but it wasn't perfect. About 2,400 V1s still got through. For V2s, there was no defence. Zero. Nothing. British scientists considered options. Shoot down V2s in flight? Impossible. Too fast, too high. Detect launches and warn people? Possible, but not implemented. Warning time would be 4 minutes at most, not enough to evacuate areas. The only solution was Crossbow. Find and destroy the launch capabilities. Attack the source. The assessment. Nobody agreed on post-war. Historians debated Crossbow's effectiveness. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, an official post-war analysis, called the Peenemünde raid not effective. The Germans recovered quickly. Production wasn't significantly disrupted. The delay was minimal. But in 2006, historian Adam Tooze judged Peenemünde highly successful. It forced dispersal, disrupted coordination, killed key scientists, undermined morale. Both are partially correct. Tactically, Peenemünde didn't destroy V2 production. Strategically, it delayed the program at a crucial moment. Overall, Crossbow assessment is similarly mixed. Resources consumed, enormous. 36,000 plus tons of bombs, hundreds of aircraft lost, thousands of sorties. V-weapons prevented, debatable. Germany planned to launch 6,000 V1s per month. Actual averaged less than 1,000 per month. Crossbow bombing reduced this. But how much? V2 production goal 900 per month. Actual averaged 600 per month. Crossbow impact? Uncertain. The delays are clearer. V1 operational deployment delayed 3 months. V2 delayed 6 months. These delays mattered. If V weapons had been ready in March 1944, 2 months before D-Day, the invasion fleet could have been targeted. Embarkation ports struck. The invasion possibly delayed. That didn't happen, because of Crossbow. So, the operation succeeded strategically, even if tactically inefficient. The modern parallel. Nobody ignores Operation Crossbow established the template for modern intelligence operations against emerging threats. Israel's destruction of Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor in 1981. Intelligence identified the threat, analyzed construction, planned precise strike, destroyed the facility before it became operational. Pure Crossbow. US operations against Iran's nuclear program, satellite surveillance, intelligence analysis, targeted sabotage, cyber attacks, Stuxnet. Same principles. Identify the threat early, disrupt development, prevent operational deployment. Modern missile defense systems trace directly to Crossbow lessons. You can't always defend against the weapon. Sometimes you must destroy the capability. The intelligence fusion Crossbow pioneered, combining satellite imagery, signals intelligence, human intelligence, technical analysis, is standard now. The National Photographic Interpretation Center in the US, the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, modern successors to RAF Medmenham, using satellites instead of Spitfires, computer analysis instead of stereoscopes, but the mission is identical. Find the threat, analyze the capability, enable the response. The questions nobody answers. Was Operation Crossbow worth the cost? 36,000 tons of bombs, hundreds of aircraft lost, thousands of aircrew killed, resources diverted from strategic bombing, German industry less damaged, oil production less disrupted. Some historians argue Crossbow was wasteful. The V weapons were never going to change the war's outcome. Resources should have focused on conventional targets, but others counter. Nobody knew that in 1943-1944. The V weapons were unknown quantities. The threat seemed existential. Policymakers couldn't gamble. The psychological factor was also real. British morale mattered. V1s terrorized London. The government had to respond. Perhaps the most important achievement, Crossbow prevented the V weapons from disrupting D-Day. If V1s had launched in March 1944, if V2s had been operational in June 1944, ships in the Channel could have been hit. Embarkation ports could have been struck. The invasion might have been delayed. That delay alone justified Crossbow. The women nobody celebrated at RAF Medmenham. Women dominated the photographic interpretation workforce. Constance Babington Smith, Ursula Powys-Libby, Sarah Churchill, Winston Churchill's daughter, dozens of others. They worked 12-hour shifts, examining photographs through stereoscopes, looking for tiny details, changes in shadows, new construction, displaced soil. The work was mentally exhausting, staring at photographs for hours, straining to see patterns, searching for anomalies. A V1 on a launch ramp might measure 2 millimeters on a photograph. You had to spot it, identify it, report it. The women at Medmenham were extraordinarily skilled. Many had no prior military or intelligence experience. Art historians, archaeologists, museum curators. Their ability to analyze images, recognize patterns, spot details, made them perfect for photographic interpretation. Constance Babington Smith was one of the best. She specialized in aircraft identification, could recognize German aircraft types from silhouettes, knew wingspan measurements, engine configurations, design details. In 1943, she was shown photographs of Peenemünde, told to look for something new. She found it, a tiny cross-shaped object on a ramp, wingspan, about 20 feet, unusual configuration, a pulse jet engine visible on top, the first photographic identification of the V1. Her discovery enabled countermeasures, allowed estimation of capabilities, informed defence planning. She received the MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, in 1945, modest recognition for crucial work. Most of the women at Medmenham received no recognition. Their work remained classified for decades. They returned to civilian life, kept their secrets, told no one what they'd done. The cost, nobody calculated beyond British and German losses. Crossbow had another victim, French civilians. The V weapon sites were in France. The bombing raids struck French territory. French people died. The ski sites were often near small villages. Bombing was imprecise. Civilian casualties were inevitable. French resistance networks understood. They reported the sites, knowing Allied bombs would follow, accepting the cost. Better to destroy the sites, stop the V weapons, even if French civilians died in the process. But the moral calculation was terrible. Allied bombers killing French civilians to protect British civilians. How many French people died in crossbow raids? The exact number is unknown. Hundreds at minimum, possibly thousands. This aspect of crossbow is rarely discussed. The necessary sacrifice, the unavoidable cost, the moral complexity, war forces' impossible choices, the revelation nobody wanted when Allied forces overran Nordhausen. In April 1945, they found the Mittelwerk facility and the Dora concentration camp. The horror was immediate. Thousands of emaciated survivors, corpses everywhere, the stench of death. American soldiers who liberated the camp were traumatized. They'd seen combat. They'd seen death. But Dora was different. This wasn't war. This was industrialized murder. The survivors told their stories, forced to work underground assembling V2s, 12-hour shifts, minimal food, brutal beatings. Prisoners who couldn't work were killed, hanged, shot, worked to death. The V2 production line ran through tunnels carved into mountains. Workers assembled rockets surrounded by death. The machines they built would kill civilians in London and Antwerp. They had no choice. Build the rockets or die. Arthur Rudolph, production manager at Mittelwerk, later joined Operation Paperclip, came to America, worked on the Saturn V program, helped put Americans on the moon. In 1984, evidence of his involvement in slave labor emerged. He fled the United States, died in Germany, never prosecuted. The V2 wasn't just Hitler's vengeance weapon. It was a crime against humanity, built on slavery, powered by death. Every V2 launch represented two tragedies. The deaths it would cause when it struck. The deaths that occurred building it. More people died building V2s than died from V2 attacks. The weapon killed its makers more than its targets. The technology that never stopped. The V2's technological legacy is everywhere. Every space launch uses principles developed at Peenemünde: liquid-fueled rockets, gyroscopic guidance, thrust vectoring, the Saturn V that landed humans on the Moon, designed by Wernher von Braun, using knowledge from V2 development, the Space Shuttle, the International Space Station, SpaceX Falcon rockets, Blue Origin New Glenn, all descendants of the V2, ballistic missiles that terrorized the Cold War, Soviet SS-4, SS-5, SS-6, American Jupiter, Thor, Atlas, all based on V2 technology, modern ICBMs, Minuteman III, Trident D5, Russian RS-28 Sarmat, still using concepts from 1944. The military technology is even more direct. Patriot missile defense, THAAD systems, Aegis ballistic missile defense, all trying to solve the problem the V2 created: how to defend against ballistic missiles, a problem that remains unsolved 80 years later. The memorial nobody built. There's no major memorial to Operation Crossbow, no monument to the reconnaissance pilots, no plaque for the photographic interpreters, no statue of the bomber crews. The Imperial War Museum in London has exhibits about the V weapons, the defence measures, the civilian experience, but Operation Crossbow itself, the intelligence campaign, the crossbow bombing, the whole secret war, remains relatively unknown. Part of this is classification. The work at Medmenham was classified until the 1970s. Many participants were bound by the Official Secrets Act. They couldn't tell their stories. By the time the secrets were revealed, most participants were old. Many had died. The story was forgotten. Only in recent decades have historians fully documented Crossbow. Books like Alan Williams' Operation Crossbow: The Untold Story, 2013, academic studies, documentaries. The 1965 film Operation Crossbow dramatized the story, but mixed fact with fiction, created misconceptions. The real story is more interesting than the movie. Thousands of people, working in secret, analyzing millions of photographs, flying dangerous missions, bombing defended targets, all to stop weapons most people had never heard of, to prevent attacks most people couldn't imagine, to protect civilians from terror weapons. They succeeded. Not perfectly, not without cost, but they succeeded. The lesson that endures Operation Crossbow proved something fundamental. Intelligence can be as decisive as firepower. Understanding the threat matters as much as defeating it. Knowing where to strike is as important as striking. Patience and analysis can prevent disaster. Modern militaries understand this. Every major power invests heavily in intelligence. Satellites, signals intercepts, human sources, technical analysis, because Crossbow showed it works. The reconnaissance pilots who flew unarmed over Germany, the photographic interpreters who found V weapon sites in millions of images, the bomber crews who struck targets they barely understood. They fought a different kind of war, not with bravery alone, but with intelligence, with analysis, with patient, careful work, and they won. The secret war that changed everything, June 13, 1944. The first V1 struck London, but Operation Crossbow had been fighting for over a year, August 17, 1943. 596 bombers struck Peenemünde, because photographic interpreters found it, November 1943. 96 ski sites discovered in France, because reconnaissance pilots photographed them, April 1944. Crossbow attacks given absolute priority, because intelligence revealed the threat. September 1944. First V2 struck London, but 6 months later than Germany planned, because Crossbow delayed it. March 1945, last V2 launched, Allied armies had overrun the launch areas. Victory was assured. Operation Crossbow didn't win World War II alone, but it prevented the V weapons from changing the war's course. It protected D-Day. It defended civilians. It bought time for Allied victory, at enormous cost, with incredible dedication, through secret sacrifice. The heroes who fought this war remain largely unknown. Their names aren't on memorials. Their sacrifices aren't celebrated. Their achievements were classified. But they changed history, one photograph at a time, one intelligence report at a time, one bombing raid at a time. They saw what others missed. They understood what others couldn't. They acted when others doubted. They were the warriors who fought with cameras and calculations, with stereoscopes and equations, with analysis and insight. They won a war most people never knew was being fought. Operation Crossbow, the secret war against Hitler's Vi weapons, the intelligence campaign that helped save thousands of lives. The forgotten operation that changed how we fight wars, in the details of aerial photographs, in the courage to fly unarmed into danger, in the patient analysis of millions of images, in the sacrifice of thousands who kept secrets for decades. They found the truth. They acted on it. They prevailed. And truth, carefully analyzed and courageously acted upon, became the greatest weapon of all. The secret war is over. The weapons are museum pieces. The heroes are mostly gone. But the lesson remains. Intelligence matters. Analysis wins wars. Secrets, revealed at the right moment, can change history. Operation Crossbow proved it, and the world has never forgotten, even if it never knew the full story until now. Epilogue. The numbers that tell the story. Let the final accounting speak for itself. Operation Crossbow. By the numbers. Duration: November 1943 to May 1945. Reconnaissance missions: thousands. Exact number classified. Photographs analysed: millions. Photographic interpreters at Medmenham, nearly 2,000 at peak. Bombing sorties against V weapon targets, over 25,000. Bombs dropped, 36,000 plus tons by RAF alone, additional thousands by USO. Allied aircraft lost to crossbow operations, hundreds. Allied aircrew killed, thousands. The V1 campaign, over 30,000 V1s produced by Germany. Approximately 16,500 launched, about 10,000 aimed at England. Roughly 2,400 reached London. 6,184 British civilians killed, 17,181 injured. 80% plus interception rate achieved by March 1945. The V2 campaign, approximately 6,000 V2s produced, about 3,000 launched in combat. Roughly 1,400 struck England, 2,154 people killed in London. Thousands more injured. Additional V2s struck Antwerp and continental targets. No effective defence existed. The human cost at Mittelwerk: 12,000 to 20,000 slave labourers died building V2s. More deaths than V2s caused. The strategic impact: V1 deployment delayed by 3 months. V2 deployment delayed by 6 months. These delays protected D-Day, prevented disruption of the invasion, allowed Allied victory to proceed on schedule. The technological legacy: every space rocket descended from V2. Every ballistic missile traced lineage to Peenemünde. The space age began with terror weapons. The intelligence legacy: modern satellite reconnaissance, photographic analysis, multi-source intelligence fusion, all pioneered by Crossbow. The moral legacy: uncomfortable questions never fully answered. When does bombing become terrorism? When does intelligence justify civilian casualties? How do we honour scientists who built murder machines then flew us to the moon? The final truth: Operation Crossbow was messy, costly, morally complex, and strategically essential. It saved thousands of lives while taking thousands. It pioneered technologies of peace built from weapons of war. It proved that secrets revealed can be more powerful than secrets kept. And it showed that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on battlefields, but in darkened rooms where patient analysts search millions of photographs for truth. The secret warriors of Operation Crossbow changed history. We owe them remembrance. We owe them gratitude. We owe them the truth of their story. Finally told. Was Operation Crossbow worth the cost? 36,000 tons of bombs, hundreds of aircraft lost, thousands of aircrew killed, resources diverted from strategic bombing, German industry less damaged, oil production less disrupted. Some historians argue Crossbow was wasteful. The V weapons were never going to change the war's outcome. Resources should have focused on conventional targets, but others counter. Nobody knew that in 1943-1944. The V weapons were unknown quantities. The threat seemed existential. Policymakers couldn't gamble. The psychological factor was also real. British morale mattered. V1s terrorized London. The government had to respond. Perhaps the most important achievement, Crossbow prevented the V weapons from disrupting D-Day. If V1s had launched in March 1944, if V2s had been operational in June 1944. Ships in the Channel could have been hit. Embarkation ports could have been struck. The invasion might have been delayed. That delay alone justified Crossbow. The secret war that never ended, Operation Crossbow, established precedents still used today. Photographic reconnaissance and analysis, intelligence fusion from multiple sources, targeting of research and development facilities, preemptive strikes against emerging threats. Modern intelligence agencies use the same techniques. Satellite imagery instead of aerial photography. Computer analysis instead of stereoscopic viewers. But the principles remain identical. Find the threat early. Track its development. Disrupt production and testing. Destroy launch capabilities. The secret war against Hitler's V weapons showed that intelligence could be as important as firepower. That understanding the threat was as crucial as destroying it. That patient analysis could prevent catastrophe. The lessons endure. The heroes who fought this secret war mostly died unknown, their work classified, their achievements hidden, their sacrifices unrecognized. But they changed history, one photograph at a time, one intelligence report at a time, one bombing raid at a time. They were the warriors who fought with cameras and calculations, with analysis and insight, with courage in secrecy. They won a war most people never knew was being fought. Operation Crossbow, the secret war that saved thousands, the intelligence campaign that helped win World War II. The forgotten heroes who saw what others missed, in the shadows of reconnaissance photographs, in the details of technical analysis, in the courage to fly unarmed into danger. They found the truth, and truth became the greatest weapon of all.